Radio podcast, your home for horological hot takes, taboo topics, and often unpopular watch opinions. I am your host, Brodinky. With me, as always, is my co-host, Schmidt. Friend of the show, recently referred to as Schmidt Lovin'. I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. Schmidt, how's it going?
I'm doing fine, my friend. How are you doing?
Actually pretty good. I had a very long day. I just hosted about 1,400 people for a gigantic barbecue. I am a little shot, but pretty interesting day overall. At some point throughout the day, I happened to sort of peek out into the dining room, and I had to do a double take because I saw someone I recognized, and I said, it couldn't be. Turns out I was right. One of my favorite New York Giants of all time came to dine with us today.
Uh-oh.
Justin Tuck. So that was sick.
No way.
Yeah, very, very good defensive player back when they were winning Super Bowls. A very important guy for us. And he's unmistakable. He's enormous. He has a very distinct look to him. I was like, oh my God. Obviously I didn't go say hi.
You're fangirling a little bit, huh?
I don't fangirl much. I fangirl today, let me tell you. and nobody else knew who he was. I was like, I'm just here in my own little bubble. But yeah, I didn't know. I don't approach him. I really don't do that to people, especially celebrities in public and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to blow them up, especially amongst their peers. But it was really cool for me. It was a very cool day in that regard. And then I had that big event. So overall, not a bad day. What else is going on with you?
Nothing much, man. Just getting back from a little bit of travel for work, as always. It's getting more and more difficult to record these episodes, unfortunately, but such is life. But just enjoying the time here, getting ready for the 4th. I'm sure you're a little fourth out right now, even though we're not quite there yet. But yeah, excited for the long weekend ahead, getting to spend some quality time with the family before I head on another trip next week. So
very good, very good. Before we jump into things here, I would like to say, for those who listen to our, I don't know what you call them, brethren, friend, whatever podcasts, on the latest Spirit of Time, Greg mentioned the film Hustle. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I haven't.
Dude, let me tell you, probably the best movie I've seen in a long time.
Really?
Yes. Sandler, he's made a lot of iffy movies of recent. This one crushed it. And it's not just because I'm a big sports guy and because I knew everybody who was in it. Like, it's a movie that has sports in it, but it is not necessarily a movie about basketball.
Okay. Because I mean, from what I saw, he's kind of like, is he like an agent or?
He's a scout.
He's a scout. Okay. All right.
And so he's trying to find the next big player. He goes overseas. It shows him in his journeys and his trials and tribulations and everything and his ups and downs. And it's funny, it's got some Sandler one-liners in it and stuff, but it's a serious movie and it gets emotional at times, but really, really great movie. A ton of cameos, so many that you don't even realize how many people are really in this movie. And that's actors, athletes, everybody. And
because I was going to
really
say, cool. Even from the trailer, like I saw like actual NBA players and things like that are in the film just from the trailer that I saw. I witnessed some people that are, actual people.
Yeah, so really, really great movie. I urge everybody to see that. It's kind of like today's, I don't know if you've ever seen He Got Game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A Spike Lee movie filmed in Coney Island about Ray Allen. Well, not about, starring Ray Allen and Denzel, but similar kind of idea where it's got basketball in it, but it's not necessarily a basketball-only movie. Like, it's about their lives together, right? And it's kind of a similar idea. It's not just about basketball, but a lot of fun. It's got competitive parts. It's got humorous parts, sad parts.
It's kind of like a Jerry Maguire kind of feel. Did you ever watch the movie?
Yes, that's a very accurate description of that. Okay, I would definitely say that's a good description. Where you got,
it's more the behind the scenes of the world and the lifestyle and everything like that, not necessarily about the actual basketball game itself.
Yeah, but it's it's fun to watch that part too. It's got some entertaining games in it and things, and you get to see competition, and it's all about, it's got real players, so that's fun. But definitely a great recommendation on his part. And they even rag on the Philly sports fans, which because, if anybody knows anything about Philly, they're ruthless. And they mentioned it a couple times, so that's pretty funny also. So great recommendation there, Greg. Big ups to you on that one.
Yeah, I was thinking what we should call ourselves if we're gonna. The Watch Pod Triumvirate crossed my mind. I think
You know
that's
what's funny?
kind of
I thought of that one too. I thought of
really,
the same exact name because of "I Love You, Man," where he calls
yeah,
the Rush the Holy Triumvirate.
yeah.
Speaking of Rush, Geddy Lee follows Berdinky. Just FYI, the bassist
Of
from
course he
Rush.
does, right? Why not?
Why wouldn't he?
Why not? Yeah, but I think
But
I think it has a nice ring to it. Watch Pod Triumvirate. I like that.
yeah,
So
well, right now our group podcast, our group chat is the Crotch Podcast Alliance. So can't go anywhere but up from there.
the Crotch Pod Alliance, yeah. And your boy Schmidt's not on that group chat, unfortunately. Hanging out. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not salty about it at all.
Before we jump into our topic today, we have a couple new releases to cover. I think everybody is a bit hot and cold on the new Breitling Super Ocean.
Yeah.
I will say, at first, I really disliked it, but having looked into it a little more, I don't hate it. It's almost like when you hear a song for the first time and you're like, this is terrible. And then it turns out you like sing it the next week and you're like, okay, I can get into this.
Yeah.
I definitely need to see this in person. It's really got some interesting quirks to it. What really is weird to me is that they offer this watch in, at least from what I've seen, four different sizes.
Yeah. Four sizes for
I'm
sure.
looking at 46 millimeter, 44, 42, and 36.
Yeah.
And that's a big jump down. I mean, logically, you would think maybe 38, although I understand because they have a previous Super Ocean in 36, so you don't have to change movements too much. You could probably drop it right in the same case dimensions, I guess. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
Understandable.
and I think from what I've kind of seen echoed on social and different avenues, YouTube and stuff like that, people that are already starting to cover this piece, it seems like this might be a replacement collection for the current Super Ocean line. So they're going to go full steam ahead into more the vintage vein across all of the models, which I don't know how that's going to sit with everybody. I personally happen to really like the current Super Ocean, not with the Super Ocean heritage, but the Super Ocean line itself with the enlarged Arabic numerals. I think it's a very cool look. I think it's distinctly Breitling. It has kind of that retro moderny vibe to it that I think does really well. Price point's always been good. So I think for your average consumer, this is probably a little bit more polarizing. However, that said, for your watch collector, this probably seems more like something that they would pick up. But that's going to be the tricky part. Are you selling to the watch community, which might comprise a very small percentage of your overall buyers? Or are you selling specifically to, kind of the average person that's going to walk into your store and buy one of these watches that really doesn't care about the vintage aspect or the collectability of it or anything like that?
Let me ask you, do you know what the previous price point is or was?
Let me double check. I think it was right around the $4,000 price point, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, these new ones
Because
are
these,
around, are a little more,
yeah,
around five, closer to five.
yeah, these are closer to five, it looks like. But let me see if I can track down that original price.
But they kind of went the popular route now where you offer a bajillion colors. And I did see, I don't know, is that a gold tone or is that a bronze? I
It's
didn't
a
look into
bronze,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bronze. So there's a bronze for sure. There was apparently a specialty version of for yeah, there's a regular bronze in 44 and a green bronze in 42, both of them in different color dials. And then there's like I think it's maybe a two-tone variation or something like that.
I did hear about it too. So.
Yeah, so there's a couple versions, and then there's like a super limited Kelly Slater version,
Oh,
which
yep.
was like an orange dial on a green rubber strap. Um, that that I think is going to be extremely hard to get. A buddy of mine who's already gone hands on with these watches has told me like that particular model at his local AD is already spoken for, and they're only getting one.
Yeah.
So it seems like maybe the people who are going to carry this line, if you want the Kelly Slater one, like you're probably just going to have an opportunity to get one of them.
I will say I'm probably the most intrigued by the 36 millimeter model. I do want to see how that looks and wears in person, especially because it doesn't have the same sort of flamboyant bezel as the rest of them do. It has a steel bezel, so it gives you a little bit more of a conservative look, and it comes in my favorite colorway of theirs, which is orange. I think I like the orange and the black best of all. I'm not so into the turquoise and everything. I think that's kind of more Dox's range, as we've spoken
Yeah, yeah,
about,
yeah.
the aquamarine and everything. I think they do that plenty good already. I don't think anybody else needs to get into that. I guess I understand given the market as it is right now, where everybody loves everything in different colors. But for me, I think these being more traditional divers in black, orange, maybe a blue would be, I don't know, a little bit more of an on the nose offering.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And just kind of circling back to what we were talking about with the previous generation. So it looks like they've officially removed the previous generation from the website completely.
Okay.
Like all the links that I can find are broken links now, so they no longer exist, at least on the Breitling US website. But it does look like we were looking at a price point between 3,700 and 4,200, depending on kind of which one you got. So that
Okay.
is
So you're
something that
looking
was, yeah,
anywhere from
kind of
500 to a
similar.
thousand more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a completely different collection. Going to be some new stuff maybe with new tech. I don't know, but you know, um, a different aesthetic altogether. But the previous generation is now completely discontinued. It looks like.
Okay. And now this model's a callback, right, to a previous model that was a chronograph.
Yes, yes.
I
So
believe it's reference 2005.
2005 is right. Yep, that's right.
Okay,
So
and this
this was a
was
model
yeah.
that Breitling called the slow chrono. Essentially, it was a diver's chronograph made in the 60s, big old fat chapter ring. And essentially, it was a chronograph that didn't have a hour and seconds indication. You just had a large hand for the actual chronograph. So as you would start, you would do your dive. Instead of rotating your bezel to track your dive time, which you could do, you could literally run your chronograph, and as the minutes would elapse, this giant slow chronograph hand would tick over the minutes. So it wasn't actually tracking running seconds, it wasn't tracking hours, it was only tracking active minutes. Which again, if you think about it in diving, very seldomly are you ever going to dive more than 45 minutes, more than an hour, depending on depths and different things like that, unless you're a very technical diver, which the average person, especially in the 1960s, really just is not at this point. So that was a cool watch. I mean, it was funky, had a unique complication, very interesting design, and they're really trying to, kind of call back to the 2005 model. But I'm just not. I don't know. I'm not sold on it. Again, you mentioned this. You have to see it in person. I'm with you. The thing is like I want to like it because I love the slow chrono design. And as soon as I saw this, I immediately was like, this is exactly what that was. And then everyone started to talk about it. So I knew that this is how they were going to communicate this watch. It was going to be about, referencing the slow chrono. But that said, I wish it was the slow chrono,
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
getting just a fat paddle minute hand here.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't know, man. I like the colorways I really like. I think they're great. I was a little sad that they went into the Tiffany vein and did the aqua blue. It's kind of like that Doxa blue. And again, I get it. There's a market for it. People are going to want to seek that one out and they're going to buy it. Breitling knows exactly what they're doing. There's also a green dial version. I mean, come on. It's all the same stuff, right? We're seeing it with Omega. We're seeing it with other brands. We're seeing stuff that's on trend. I would have to say my personal favorite, just looking at all the specs, is the 42 version with the silver white dial with the blue bezel.
Okay.
I think that one looks really, really sharp, especially on the bracelet. But I think all the models, overall look handsome. I just don't know if this is going to be an attractive enough watch for the average consumer. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
So you're thinking there's too much inside baseball
I,
on
I think
Breitling's
so. I
half.
think so, man. I really wonder if your average person who knows nothing about watches, nothing about history, is going to walk into a store and seek out this watch. You know,
I
if it
think it's
was
fair.
me, if it was me, they'd probably end up with the Super Ocean Heritage before this one, or a Colt or something like that, because this is just a little bit too out there in terms of aesthetics. Now, the previous generation, a lot more people, inclusive of the watch community, could have purchased that watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it just looks good. You know, it's a Breitling. You know, it's a good watch. It's just going to perform. This has a little bit more funkiness to it, which I don't know if that's going to translate with every single consumer, especially the non-WIS people out there.
I think that's valid. I think that's very valid.
But the 36 orange does look good, my friend. You
Yeah, I
copping
think
you a new Breitling?
again, I would like to go try it on, which I can do, which is great.
You certainly can do that. I mean, I already saw some retailers posting them today.
Yeah, I can't
They're
lie.
they're
That
already in
I
stores.
think 36 orange on the bracelet would be cool. And you know what? They finally removed the ladies designation from their 36 millimeter divers.
Well, hey, maybe you had something to say about that, because I remember we had a big stink about that earlier last year when we first started the pod, and it's good to see that, hey, it's 36, like anybody could rock it. Why are we assigning specific genders to these watches? It doesn't matter.
Okay, now that we've beaten that horse to death, I think we can go on to one other model that'll probably be real quick, and that's the Oris. I believe it's called the New York Harbor. It's an
Yeah, New
Aquis.
York
It's
Harbor.
got a mother of pearl dial, and it's in green. And I think it looks really good. It gives me a lot of, and I guess it's because of the integrated look, everything. It gives me AP offshore vibes.
Okay, I could see that. I
Yeah.
could see that.
But I like it. I like it a lot. I think it looks really good. I think the dial is very well executed, and you get sort of that pearlescent aesthetic that you would see on an oyster shell. Or you know what? Oysters also make pearls, so that's kind of a cool little tangential connection there.
No, I think it's very handsome watch. Every single one of these dials will be unique. The watch is made to benefit a good cause. It's about ocean conservation, about restoring, oysters to New York's harbor. Like, to me, that's very cool. It's a cool connection. It's a unique colorway. I don't know, did you catch if it was a US exclusive, or if it's
I did not.
okay. I didn't either. Something tells me that it is, but I mean, I could be completely wrong off of that. We've covered so much stuff recently and read so many articles. It's kind of hard to keep track, but I think the watch looks great. This is a step in the right direction for Oris for me, in contrast to that watch that we talked about recently, right? The travel watch that they did a few weeks back. So much better option. I think it's going to be a much more handsome piece. Everyone that's seen it in person loves it. The press photos, I think, are fantastic. So I think this is going to do well for them. It's a cool green. It's benefiting a great cause, and it's got a unique dial that I think most men probably would have historically, kind of stayed away from. But it doesn't feel overly feminine
I
in
don't think
any
so.
way. It kind of looks like a green ocean, and that to me looks very cool. So I think it's a home run from Oris for sure.
Yeah, and I think where that Holstein edition was very niche and very Oris collector friendly for the fanatics, I think this hits for everyone. I think this will be a slam dunk for them. So great job on their part in that, and
Yeah,
obviously for the cause in general.
absolutely, absolutely. See, that's the same thing I was talking about Breitling. Is it going to be a home run for everybody? That's going to be the question.
Yeah, and I think again, I think it's valid. I think there have been too many brands that have alienated, whether it be the consumer public or their own fanboys. You got to satisfy everybody, right? It's
And it's
about
hard. It's hard.
yeah, it's about how many opportunities you have to snag that sale, right? It's not about necessarily who you're appeasing.
Absolutely right.
But this is not
Absolutely.
a watches and marketing podcast. This is a watch podcast. So on to the topic here. Going back to our buddies over at Spirit of Time. Again, we have our little group chat. We often kick topics back and forth, and once in a while we decide to do a group topic. This week on their show, they sort of extended the challenge to the other two shows, us and Whiskey and Watches, and they laid out some ground rules and they said, follow if you dare. They want to do a little challenge where you pick a decade. So, and it has to be an even 10-year decade. It can't be like 1925 to 1935, right? It's got to
Yeah.
be 1920 to
20 to 30,
1930.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. So Greg and Matt took the 90s and 2000s, which is funny because I'm pretty sure we just got done bashing the style like I both of those.
Oh no, they made mention of that.
No,
They're
they
like,
did. It
yeah,
was pretty
Schmidt was
funny.
roasting the 2000s and the 90s. And I was like, yeah, it's true. It's just that's I mean, and it's funny that I said that because he even brought this up. He's like, one of my favorite watches is the mid 90s Seamaster
The Bot
300 meter.
Seamaster, right? It's an
I mean,
all-time watch.
and that looking back on it, I'm like, okay, yes, that is a very 90s watch. But I almost to me that's almost completely removed. It's such an icon status that it's just like it's not even
It's
to be
almost
considered.
standalone.
Exactly, not even to be considered with the rest of the pack. So it was funny. I was listening to it again today in preparation for this podcast, and I was just like, yeah, it was kind of dumb for me to say that. It's like one of my favorite watches ever was made in the 90s. So there you go.
So you pick a decade. We're going to pick 3 watches from that decade. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best 3 watches in that decade, the most famous, the most notable watches in that decade. It just has to be 3 that you would throw into a collection together. So a little bit of personal preference involved there. There is no right or wrong answers. So I think you got 3, I got 3. We're just going to let this shit roll.
Let's do it.
I think I have a theme for my collection that I've built here, and I noticed it when I got to the end, and I think the theme is unapologetic.
Unapologetic.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
all right.
I picked one of my favorite decades in horology, which is the 1970s.
Okay.
Now, I don't think I'm going to go where everybody thinks I'm going to go. I think everybody says 1970s, you are going Seiko Chronos to the wall. Yes. I would love to do that. I would absolutely love to. I can make a collection, Pogue, Bruce Lee, and let me just go 6138s and 39s, whole way, done, put it to bed, Kakume, whatever. I'll just run all day long.
Just call up DC Vintage, man. He'll get you squared away tomorrow.
Exactly, exactly. But I'm not going to do that. And I do have a Seiko. I'm not going to lie to you. But I think this collection I've built is very unapologetic in both what the watches are and what the watches are to their brand. So I will kick it off with, I'm going to start with the most mundane pick of the bunch. I have a soft spot for this generation of Rolex Datejust. This 70s, I don't know how long it spanned, but with the janky Jubilee bracelet, very plain. I believe the reference on the one I like is 1604. Gray dial. To me, this is the elite Datejust of Datejusts. And people are going to say, what about Wimbledon? And I think it's right up there with the two-tone around the same time period, the Patrick Bateman, American Psycho, even though allegedly I was a Seiko. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just a rumor I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, but I really can't confirm. It's been forever since I've seen that film.
Yeah, and I'm not about to zoom in on the film. But anyway, that two-tone Datejust and this one for me go hand in hand as the quintessential Datejust. This gray dial, it's got a sunray finish. It has so much depth to it. Not the silver dial, the gray dial. It's very deep. It's a dark gray. It contrasts with the steel beautifully. And against the texture of the fluted bezel, because you got to go fluted. If you're going to go Datejust, you have to go fluted.
Well, if you're going this generation of Datejust, you're going fluted all 100%. The
way. This watch, every time I see it, and it's on a lot of vintage sites, I don't know many collectors that have it, but I've seen it on a ton of vintage reseller sites, and every time I see it, it just grabs me by the cojones, and
it's a good looking one.
I might have to buy one eventually, but
it's a good looking watch.
Unapologetically Rolex Datejust, and I love it. Cyclops, great dial. It's in 36 millimeter, which to me is the elite Datejust size because although it's a dress sport watch, to me it's always read a little more dressy.
Yeah.
And I love those old bracelets. I do. Even the one that was on my 5-digit Explorer 2, I prefer those bracelets. I don't need an easy link and a super quick adjust. I don't need none of it. I like those old minimalist bracelets that don't feel like you're wearing something heavy. They don't flop around because there's not a lot of counterweight to them. They just sit. They're super comfortable. They might have a tiny bit of stretch, but it's part of their charm. And to
Hey man,
me,
just send it to Rolly Works. They'll get you straightened up, man.
let
LA
me tell you,
Watchworks.
that dude
There's a
took
lot of
care of me.
guys. There's a lot of guys that can work magics with bracelets like that got stretched these days. It's crazy. But I mean, I'm gonna say this. This dial, the gray, and specifically some of these versions, even the fluting and the bezel is different on
Yeah.
some of these models, you know. Like some of the later Rolex Datejust, which I don't particularly like, they have very tight flutes. Some of these like 70s models, it has more of that like engine turned look, like the
Yes.
hand finishing that they used to do on some of the other, like Air Kings and some of the, the Thunderbirds, things like that. It's just a great looking watch. And for me too, this is one of those watches where Rolex got everything perfect.
Smoked it.
Everything perfect. And that's not something that I will openly admit often. Okay. You guys know where my sensibilities lie when it comes to the crown. But this is a watch that is the archetypal dress watch, sport watch, whatever you want to call it. To me, as kind of like what you think, this to me is just classic dress watch. Like it just, you put it on, it's just a beater. You just wear it and it just continues to work every single day, day in, day out. Doesn't matter. It's always going to look amazing. This is the one watch for the one watch collection. Like this is
That's
that watch.
exactly how I see it.
And the other thing too that I really love with these older Datejusts is the proportionality of the case and the lugs and everything. Like this is a watch that you can put on leather straps. Like modern Datejusts, I don't care how many times you try to stage a photo, the lugs are too fat. They do not look good with straps. Like period at all. They
Yeah.
were never designed to have it.
Modern Rolex in general just do not lend to taking them off bracelets. And
No,
they
they
make the
want it
bracelets so great because they don't want you to take them off.
exactly. And again, no shame in the game on that, but these older vintage models, like that was a watch that you could take the bracelet off. You could put it on a nice gray suede or blue alligator or something like that and really set the watch off, especially with that gray dial. This is a banger of a pick, bro.
Yeah, I every time I see it, I'm so floored with it. I really think I might end up picking up one of those soon. I mean, I think if the market bottoms out like everybody's projecting, and used watches and watches that people don't care about that much tank, I would consider picking this up at a
Yeah.
nice price if it ever went there. Not
Yeah,
counting
yeah,
my
yeah.
chickens on that, but I'll hold out.
But again, some of these older models too, they're just more accessible anyway, because like less
Yes.
and less people want them. It's like it's just a good watch. Any watchmaker can service it that knows Rolex and get parts. Like it's a pretty simple watch to get sorted out. And the price points even right now, like you're looking on the higher end, sixes if you're looking, but median price from what I'm seeing is kind of like high threes, high fours. So
Yeah, but it's all about, case preservation, non-polishing, all that stuff. It's hard to
exactly.
find good examples, especially
Well,
because
look, man.
Rolex is a prestigious brand and people who own nice things want to keep them nice. So their first inclination is to polish.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's tough. It really makes it hard on those vintage style models. But
Well, I'm just gonna say this: with all the new modern technology and the watchmakers out there in the world that are doing, laser welding, I'm so fascinated by these guys that can do this, where they can take a watch that has been ground to pieces. The lugs are basically non-existent, and use laser welding and rebuild metal into the case.
it is amazing.
I mean, I can only imagine how expensive it is to do this and how labor intensive it is to do it. But the fact that you can take a watch that was quite literally on death's door and bring it back to life, and not only do it, but sharpen the lugs and the finishing like it came out of the factory, that's impressive. And you can do it in steel, you can do it in gold, you can do it in really whatever material you need it to be done. And I think that's fantastic. There's a lot of guys that are doing this out there. So don't fret. Like every time I get a dent or scratch in my watch, I'm like, yeah, someone just could laser weld that out. It's not a big deal. Like, don't worry about polishing it. Just have somebody redo the case.
Yeah, and that is the nice part about buying a vintage watch is it's expected to have scratches. So you throw a couple on there, no big
It
deal.
it's already pre-loved, baby. It's
Yeah.
good. It's good.
All right, that is my first pick. I will flip it over to you now.
All right. So you guys know where my sensibilities lie. You guys know I'm a big Omega guy. And I really wanted to do something different. I pick on Omega a lot. I choose them a lot, and I am gonna have one of these in my collection. I'm gonna have one of these for a pick, but I decided to go with the decade of the 1960s. which I think is one of the most iconic decades for watch design in general. So many great designs came out of that, specifically out of the Omega catalog. I could have chose a Seamaster 300, a Moonwatch. I mean, there's so many Rail Masters. There's so many different watches that came out in this era that would have been fantastic choices. I decided to go something a little bit different. I wanted a chrono, but I decided to go with a 1960s Omega soccer timer, which is one of my favorite watches. And if I had the coin, I would totally get one. And my specific favorite rendition is the kind of white panda dial with the roulette 24-hour inner rotating bezel. It's just an amazing watch. It is so 60s. It's right on that cusp of going into the 70s, but an amazing piece. Chronograph, manual wind, all the great Omega stuff that we get in the Speedy and everything like that. But it's really like the antithesis of the Speedmaster. It's such a cool watch, very, very funky. And it's kind of a cool story. The fact that Omega made a watch for referees to use during FIFA and World Cup competitions to time the halves of soccer matches, to me, is just so cool. And the way that all the dials are finished are reflective and indicative of that timing reference. Everything's divided into 45-minute halves. You can see this. It's clearly referenced on the dial. You have the 24-hour scale so that you can use it as a GMT if you need it. You have a day-night indication. It's just a fantastic timepiece. And this is just one of those watches that really not too many people know about unless you are an Omega fan and specifically a fan of their vintage collection. But it's just a watch that I would love to see return again, to be honest with you. But it's just one of those cool pieces, those kind of lost watches to history, those hidden gems that are in the industry. And every so often one of them pops up, they sell. But this is a really, really cool piece that I would love to personally own today if I could.
Yeah, this watch is the definition of esoteric.
That's why I wanted to go with it. I
This,
gotta give the fans what they want. I gotta give them
yes.
something a little different. If I'm gonna go with
Yeah.
Omega, it's got to be different.
And not only that, I think kind of opening people's eyes to these wacky references is like really fun. Like when we did that episode, I think it was the vintage reissue episode, and we got into the diver that they did for the Israeli defense, like all these
Oh yeah, yeah,
different
yeah.
crazy models of Banana 200, like these wacky models nobody's ever heard of. I was like, this is actually really cool. Like I never knew these existed, and they're all usually pretty expensive, but just knowing that they've been out there, like this is a cool watch.
Yeah.
Obviously, it had a practical use, but even now, like this would be fun to own. Just looking at the
I mean, and
crazy.
there's so many dial variations out there.
That's what I was gonna say. The different little nuances on the different dials and bezels.
And I mean, again, it's so 60s, so 70s, that cushion case design. Again, some had tachometer bezels that are internal, some of them had the rotating 24-hour scales, the funky mismatch color with the subbed out. Like it's just a cool watch. And man, I would really love for them to bring it back. And it would be so easy with the 3861 to redo this watch and just launch it as an LE or some type of heritage piece. I think people would lose their minds.
Do they have Olympic soccer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Omega sponsors the Olympics, yes?
They don't sponsor the Olympics. They're actually a partner of the Olympics.
Okay. Sorry.
So the distinction is that basically the International Olympic Committee actually pays Omega to do all the timing for the Olympics. So Omega
So,
doesn't pay. They get paid.
I mean, I don't see how this couldn't get done, right? If we have Olympic soccer
Well,
time to watch, Omega
I mean,
makes it.
I'm just saying this. If the Omega gods are ever listening to this, please make an Omega Soccer Timer reissue. Use the 3861. It's all right there, right in front of you. It'd be an amazing Olympic tribute watch. It'd be so cool. You imagine stocking all the referees at the World Cup or something like that with these types of watches. It'd be so cool. So cool.
I think my favorite part of this watch is the orange hands because I'm a big, huge fan of the Japan racing dials,
Yes.
and they have the orange hands. So this would be a another way to get into that without spending my life savings.
Yeah. I mean, on average, these are looking around the $5,000 price point. Some
Right.
can be had for less, but I mean,
This is
again,
swingable. The
it,
other
it's
ones are
it's it's
less
not
swingable.
impossible to get. Is it inexpensive? No, but is it impossible? Absolutely not. It's just like buying a brand new Omega. I mean, really,
Yeah,
but no brand new Omega is going to be this cool.
I think
So
you're right. I think you're right about that.
that's my pick, the soccer timer.
All right, I will give you another one of my picks here that to me is unapologetically its own brand. And this is one that I've not been very kind to lately, but I'm going to go with the Tudor Snowflake Submariner. This watch,
Okay.
right, this is what the Pelagos was based off of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I adore this watch. Square
I agree with you.
markers, snowflake hands, the proportions were beautiful. You could get a Marine Nationale edition if you were really feeling saucy, but just they nailed it so well with this. The blue dial is my favorite. It looks so good.
Yeah.
The ones I've seen have patinaed out so nicely. The contrast is so great with the dial against the sort of yellowing of the markers. And it's at the time it was, a top-notch badass tool watch. So by today's standards, maybe not so much, but it just looks so good, and I'm such a fan of this, and it's part of the reason why I originally bought the Pelagos in the first place. But it's everything I love about Tudor and their history that they are kind of muddling now.
But see, this is also when Tudor was making watches to be performance tools.
Yeah,
They didn't care about the luxury. They didn't care about the notoriety. They didn't care about the prestige. They were going to make a superior product and deliver it. And it didn't matter who ended up wearing it, whether it was the Marine Nationale or the French Legion or, the U.S. Navy. It didn't matter. It was about making a good watch that anybody could own and that you could beat the crap out of. And you're right. In some ways, this particular type of Submariner the snowflake hands, my gosh, with the snowflake hands, I think is a better looking Submariner than the Rolex counterpart. Period. That's my opinion. I love the chunkiness of it visually.
yeah,
The Rolex feels very like sleek and sexy. This feels very hyper masculine and very like rugged, like
yes,
just
that's the word I would
beefy,
use.
beefy. Even though it's the same case, it's the same bracelet, crown, all that stuff. The only thing that was different was the movement and the dial, right? Like that's kind of the idea. But this watch just has so much more visual ruggedness to it to me than standard sub. So
And I could get it with a roulette date wheel.
I know, like how, like so sick, so sick. If they weren't so expensive today,
Yes,
my God,
100%.
could you imagine if we got turned on to this like 15 years ago? We could have
Yep.
just bought these for literally pennies on the dollar.
Yeah,
It is
2 grand.
insane.
Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, these are to me just some of the coolest watches historically. I mean, as far as my
Yeah,
favorite
they are.
watches throughout history go, this is right up there. I love everything about it. And again,
And
it's
again,
just unapologetically Tudor. You have the Tudor shield, you have the snowflake hands, you have looking at it, you see Rolex heritage, but based on the dial, just at a glance, even this is not a Rolex.
yeah,
So
it's cool, man. It's a great pick. It's a great pick. Two picks from the crown, but arguably,
yeah, I zagged very hard in this episode. I think people were thinking this was just going to be Seiko. Let me just go Willard and 6309 Turtle. But done. Not so fast, folks.
no, I agree. I think these are two solid picks. And again, when I think about these are archetypes. Like these
Yes,
are
yes.
watches that have defined entire brands, entire watch collections, micros, whatever you want to talk about. These are two designs that are, as much as I'm not a Rolex fanboy, you guys know that, I cannot not give props to these designs because they are that important for the history of watchmaking, period. Like it's just these are just that good. So Whew, that's a tough act to follow, man. How am I supposed to follow that up? Um, but all right, I'm gonna make my best of it and try to do this. But the second pick that I have is also a dive watch,
Okay.
and also from the 1960s, and this is the 1960s. I'm gonna say Jenny because that's how I've always heard it pronounced, but the Jenny Caribbean 1000. So for those of you who are not familiar, Jenny, kind of a smaller micro brand, if you wanted to use a modern word. Um, Watch company back in the 60s. They used to make a lot of timepieces, and they used to also manufacture watches for other companies using their cases and bezels and things like that. And they were typically sold in dive watch shops. So, or sorry, dive shops. Let's just say not dive watch shops, but dive shops, as equipment that divers could pick up and use when they would go diving, especially during the 1960s when there wasn't really any dive computers. What made Jenny very unique is they had the Navy decompression table literally built into the bezel. So similar to Doxa and how they represented it, Jenny had a similar representation, although aesthetically they look very different. But basically, you could use it to track your total dive time, but also how much time you could stay at certain depths during your dive. It was a way for you to plan it out and make it reliable. They had several different versions. I chose the Caribbean 1000, which was a 1,000-meter rated timepiece. There's the reference 702, and this is one that typically has a yellow dial, so very similar to kind of the very similar to the kind of the Doxa yellow, but not quite as bright. But a very very cool watch. You strap this bad boy on a Tropic or on a beads of rice, and let's go. Let's go diving. Like this is a cool piece.
Now, I may have read on the internet where everything is absolutely true that this might be pronounced Yenny. I'm not 100% sure because, again, internet. Reminds me of Ron Burgundy. I believe they call it might be yogging, might be a soft J, but um, but I one time I made a meme, a joke, and it had Forrest Gump in it, and in the movie they ask him what he's going to name the boat because it's unlucky to have a boat without a name, and he says the most beautiful name in the world, Jen A. So I made a meme. It's two
Yeah,
panels,
a
and it's got
joke.
Forrest Gump, and it's got this watch in the other panel, and somebody's like, I think it's Yanni. I'm like, dude, leave me alone. I'm just trying to make a funny here, right? But that's where I heard it from. Again, might be completely false. I don't know. But that aside, in clicking around these, I went straight to the yellow. The yellow is awesome. This shade of yellow is ridiculous. I love the black and white contrast on it. It's a little bit Pittsburgh to me, Pittsburgh Steelers, Pittsburgh Penguins, whatever you want to call it. But I'm down with it. I'm here for
Black
it.
and yellow, black and yellow.
Yes, yes. Wiz Khalifa should definitely own one of these 100 Um, I love the diamond shaped pip.
Yeah.
That's
This is
very
cool.
badass. Yes, there's a lot to like about this. It's very detailed. I like the handset. I like obviously it's 1,000 meter diver. That's pretty awesome for its time period.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
it's
it's a
very
it's a beast.
aesthetically pleasing to look at. It's something very just very nicely symmetrical about it. Even with this wacky scale around the bezel, I like this watch a lot. I would definitely consider owning this had I been able to track one of these down in good condition, yada yada. But this is like one of my rabbit hole watches that I would find late at night, like when I look at like Anacars and things like that, and like
Hmm.
vintage Zodiacs. Like these are the type of watches that I get put onto, and then next thing you know, I'm exploring the Yenny back catalog, and it's 4 in the morning. But yeah, I think this is a great pick, though. I like this watch a lot. It looks like the proportions are beautiful on it, and it's a lot of what you love about other brands like Doxa, similar look, just in a more traditional case shape and everything. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and I think so. According to Watch Pro site, I just did a Google search. It is pronounced Yenny.
Okay,
So this is no J, but Yenny. But somehow they are affiliated with the actual Doxa family, and
okay,
I don't know if they're still currently producing the Yenny watches. I know they came back for a little bit a few years ago. It's kind of like a modern reissue, but I don't know if they're still continuing. I haven't seen anything from them as of late, but certainly the vintage version. That's what I would rock. I think it's a cool piece. Throw it on a ladder bracelet, throw it on a beads of rice, throw it on a tropic. We're ready to go diving. I love it.
And so many of these patinaed out so nicely too.
I know.
Like
I know.
the patina is almost another shade of yellow, so it just adds more dimension. It's actually a little bit ridiculous.
And they were sold under so many like labels, like off labels. Like it was it's crazy. Like just so cool.
Yeah, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing like Patrona or Perona, whatever this
There
is.
was there. I mean, do you ever hear like Voight, like the ball company that used to like make like sports balls and stuff? Like
Oh
Voight,
yes, Void.
yeah, Voight
Yes.
used to have like a Jenny, a Yenny diver as well. Like it was
Wow.
like with their logo. I was like, okay, like you're making sports balls and dive watches. Like those two things are synonymous. But again, they were just
Thermidor.
yeah, just all kinds
That's
of just
it's a
weird
lobster dish.
options. Is it really
Lobster
lobster's
Thermidor.
thermidor?
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different off brands, but that's kind of neat. You know, it's kind of a fun historical tidbit.
Oh, for sure.
But definitely, again, another very esoteric pick, but a very sound pick here. I like it a lot. On to my last pick, and here's Bros down the middle pitch on the nose baseball here. I went with a Seiko diver, obviously, because that's what, you know, my favorite part of Seiko's history is. Probably not the one everybody's thinking of. Again, 6309 or something in the Willard genre. I'm going with the OG Grandfather Tuna.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. So this watch was originally designed to be their sort of answer to the helium escape valve. It doesn't have one. And basically it has this honking case so that it just prevents gas from getting in altogether. And it does sort of the compression as it goes down farther. And so this was their answer to the Swiss's fancy schmancy helium escape valve. Now these, a lot of the older tunas are quartz and things like that. This is an automatic. It's got a really nice lollipop second. It's got a crown at 4, so very unobtrusive, despite the watch being rather large. It's got the shroud that everybody thinks of when you think tuna can Seiko.
Oh yeah.
I believe the reference is, I want to say 6159 7010, I think. But these are just so cool. They're unapologetic, again, unapologetically Seiko, unapologetically Seiko divers. You know, they come on rubber straps. You wear them, you strap them to your wrist. They are not small by any stretch, but there's just such an allure about them being a 600-meter diver during that period and sort of taking almost like a low-tech approach to it. It's exactly why we like watches. It's like that old world analog feel that
Yeah.
it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it doesn't need all the extra technology and extra hype. It just is what it is. And this watch, I mean, it spurred how many generations of tuna? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's an icon in Seiko's catalog, and I love the handset on it.
I was just gonna say that this is honestly one of my favorite Seiko handsets ever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I've ever seen them use it again. I mean, they have the same silhouette, but I don't ever see it with a line straight through it.
Yes,
That to me,
I
I
haven't seen
love.
that.
That to me, I love. I mean, again, I know that even my Seiko diver had this kind of similar handset, but it didn't have the lines going, vertical through the hands themselves in the middle. That to me is just so cool.
Yeah, and it doesn't have any of the modern kind of Seiko tropes that I talked about with Nick. No Prospects logo, none of that. It's just a super classic, super clean diver.
Seiko 600. That's all you need
Yes,
to know.
that's all you
Like,
need.
that's all you need to know. You know exactly what this bad boy is going to be here for. It's literally to go down and do hood rat stuff at the bottom of the ocean. So
Yes, doing hood rat stuff with my SpongeBob friends.
exactly, I
But
love it, man.
these have exploded on the vintage market, which
Oh
sucks
yeah, I'm
because
looking at price
I would
points. And
really
it's
really
kind of
like one
it's
of
kind
these.
of sick.
Yes, although the modern versions of the tunas are not horrible. I mean, especially if you get a quartz version, you could really beat the crap out of that thing. So by all means.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it looks like some of the quartz versions are $400 or so on average, but
Yeah,
47
and I think
millimeters.
yes, but I think even the automatics I think only go up to like 1,000, 1,200. Again, depending
Yeah.
on limited editions and upgraded specs and things like that. You can get ones with red text that I think are like 3 grand. But do you need that? No, you could just get like the Darth tuner or something. Just and you know what? I understand the size is very daunting, but like I said, I had that Arnie, similar dimensions.
Well, it's also a lugless case.
Yeah,
So it's literally a puck.
they
You know,
do.
it
Yeah,
just
they
sits right
do
on top of the
wonders with
wrist.
that.
Yeah.
They do wonders with those big cases. They really do,
Yeah.
Seiko. I mean, when you think about like the Willards and Turtles, like those are not small watches at all, and pretty much everybody can wear them.
Yeah. It's just how it's all about how you design the cases. And the same thing with the Ploprof. I mean, it's a lugless, watch. It's a hooded lug watch, and it wears very well despite its size dimensions. And the same thing is true here. I mean, this is a watch. And here's the other aspect of this. This is a watch specifically designed to be a tool diving watch.
Yes,
The
100%.
bigger the watch, the more legible it is underwater. And if you're actually using this for what its intended purpose actually is, which is diving, you want to watch it's actually larger. I remember the first time I dove with a Ploprof, and I finally understood why this watch was created. It was a magical moment where you kind of come to this symbiosis between you and the watch, and you understand this watch was built with every aspect of it with intention. And the same thing is true with this tuna. Like, it's designed to function exactly the way that it was intended.
Yeah, it's definitely a little more form. I'm sorry, a little more function over form.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So that is mine, and I know people are probably screaming, "Oh, but the '70s they had all the angular cases on all the fun, popular sports models now, Nautilus, Royal Oak, all that." It's just you know what it is. I if I'm gonna make a list like this, I want it to be somewhat realistic. I want to, again, could I really break the bank and spring for that Tudor sub? Yeah. Do I think I could get a Royal Oak? No. So apologies there, but it is what it is.
All right. Well, let me round out my last collection, or my last piece in the collection. I've talked about this one recently, seeing as how they're getting ready to come back. I think, or they're making a resurgence. But the last watch is I kind of wanted something that was a little bit dress watch. I did, Sporty Fun Chrono. I did Sporty Diver. Wanted something a little bit more or serious, but I want something with a complication, and I decided to go with a Vulcan Cricket. Manual wind, wristwatch, alarm feature. Some of the cases vary, some of the sizing varies. You could do gold tone, you could do silver or steel, whatever you want. There's so many options, especially in this time period. But I just think there's something so very cool about this complication that I absolutely love. I've always been a fan. And I just think it's one of those watches that watch collector people will immediately notice what it is because they're familiar with it. But even still, I don't hear a lot of people talk about Vulcan. And it's a cool brand. It has a great history. They're technically the watch company of the presidents.
The President's
The
Watch.
president's watch, which is so funny. Every president has been issued a Vulcan since basically forever, and yet Rolex gets the moniker for that, for having the presidential, right? So it is what it is. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic watch. Certainly something a little bit different. Not your run of the mill piece, but this collection, kind of, you and I were in the mindset that we didn't want to do something that was run of the mill. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think even you and I have talked about the newer ones. The newer ones look great. I mean, I think they're limited edition. And I think they're like $3,500, which is not
Yeah.
necessarily in my favor. But it has all the aesthetic of the old ones. The old ones is super cool. Again, a great function for its time period. And it has that provenance, as I think Kennedy had one and all these other super famous presidents. So it's got that going for it. And again, Vulcan is one of those brands that I'll wind up on the couch at 3 in the morning just flipping
You're
through
like,
different
should
Vulcan
I
models,
do
and
it?
I'm like, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one, because they have a lot of different references to this.
Yeah.
And it's just cool. Again, it's a cool old analog feature that you could probably still use today and have it be somewhat useful.
Oh, of course you could use it today. You could use it to take your daily pills. You could use it for a presentation to know when to stop. You could use it to remind yourself to, that your parking meters are about to expire. There's so many uses for something like that, that's an alarm feature that is just great for productivity. It's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
general reminder.
I use timers all the time because, my career involves a lot of multitasking and having your head in a lot of different places at once. And even though I'm very good at that, sometimes somebody will distract you, and now it's all over the place. So, um, a lot of things are commonly burnt in my line of work, like croutons and things that go over very fast. After like 4 or 5 minutes, you're pretty much screwed. So having something like this, I mean, we usually have a little digital timer or something, but this comes with you. I mean, if you leave the room or something, nobody knows your timer goes
Correct.
off. They have no idea what it's for. This is a little more practical. It'll go off. You can go back, fix whatever you got to do. And again, not that I would necessarily wear this at work, but it's just an example of how you could actually apply this complication where many of the watches we talk about are not useless, but just a little defunct.
Yeah. I mean, and to me, the penultimate version of this watch is the nautical cricket, which I would give a leg to own. But that's a watch for another day. That is a truly amazing watch, the nautical cricket, because you could set a mechanical alarm that would resonate underwater.
That is pretty cool.
So you could actually set a dive time and what your dive plan was, because again, everything was before computers, so there was nothing automatically telling you depth, time, anything like that. So you could set, okay, I know at this depth I can be down for 30 minutes. Let me set my alarm feature to go off 30 minutes from when I start my dive to let me know when I need to start resurfacing. Like, that is such a cool feature to be able to do that in a watch, and this is all mechanical. This is crazy. But so many of these watches have just been lost to, unfortunately, the quartz crisis, lost to time, lost to collectible favor because Houdinki's not writing about them. We'll see if that changes. But all of these things, these watches come up and then they kind of fade away. And that's for us why this podcast is so important, why we do some of these episodes, is because we want to give you guys exposure to watches that you would not have otherwise maybe thought of or heard of. And to me, that's important, because we could sit here, we could talk about Breitling and the new Oris and everything like that all day for the rest of the time, but you guys are getting that content from everyone else
Yep.
as well. Let's give you something different.
Now, do you know how they execute the alarm in it? Is it a gong or a chime or?
Yeah, it's basically like it's some of them, depending on the models that they had, you would use, like, some of them had two crowns and basically you would wind up two different mainsprings. Some of them were a little bit less, I don't want to say functional, but some of them were a little bit more primitive, where it was just kind of like you would set it, but like a plunger on the case. So it just depended, but it basically is like a it's not like a minute repeater. It's like a it's like a
Oh, okay,
rattling
so it's like
sound.
a vibrating type of alarm.
Correct, and
Okay,
that's why
because
they call it
that's
the cricket, because like
oh, okay. I
yeah,
got it.
it's
I
like
got
that.
it. Because I was wondering, because I know from looking at minute repeaters, they have gongs and chimes to represent
Yeah, it's
different
not that
different.
dung 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 da dung da. It's not like
Yeah,
that at all.
right.
It's like it's very violent. It's like
Jackhammer. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and your whole watch is shaking at the same time.
How
And
interesting.
the case backs were designed with like these holes that were sealed, but they were basically resonance chambers. So as the sound would vibrate through the case, these holes would actually amplify the
Yeah,
sound on your wrist so you could hear it better. Which again, this is 1960s technology and innovation, and we've lost so much of that today.
it's like the inverse muffler.
Yeah, I mean, and again, these watches were packaged in 34 millimeters, 35 millimeters, and the fact that we were able to do this in those sizes is insane.
Yep.
Now we can't even get three handers in those sizes anymore.
We
You
don't even
know,
want to make watches in those sizes
I
anymore.
know it's crazy. It's crazy, but certainly a very cool watch, very cool complication. And I wish more mechanical alarms would come back. I really do. Omega made some for a while. Jaeger did some for a while. Of course, Volcane did them their bread and butter. Tudor did theirs. They had the Advisor series.
Yeah, now they killed it.
And I still see them floating around, slowly decaying with the UV lights from the cases. But it's such a beautiful watch, and they do nothing with it, which is
That's
so
probably
gross.
maybe their most underrated model.
I really do like the Tudor
Everybody I
Advisor.
talk to likes that watch, and they're like, "Why doesn't this watch get enough shine?" And I'm like, "I don't have a good answer for you."
Because nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody cares about it. Nobody knows how to set it. And certainly your average salesperson in those respective stores have probably never pulled it out of the case.
And they're certainly not pitching that.
Exactly. Because they're going to sell 4 Black Bays over this one Advisor, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Because even their most recent version that had kind of like a purpley brownish dial is a stunner. It's a dial color I've never seen used on any other watch, and it looks amazing. And yet, they can't sell this watch. It's a damn shame. And it's also an extremely complicated watch for Tudor. It's a mechanical alarm. It has an alarm indication that it's on. It has a date. That's a pointer date. And it looks like it's got a power reserve. That's a pretty impressive watch.
And it's not an arm and a leg.
No. Average price point's under $4,000. So what's up?
Damn shame.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it gets covered recently.
All right. And with that, I think this is a good episode. I think we threw some curveballs here. I don't think anybody would have picked. I think maybe they would have picked the tuner for me, and maybe I don't think they would have picked Soccer Time, or they would have said Schmidt's going to throw an Omega in there. But aside from that, a Yeni, Volcane, right, and then I threw in 2 Crowns. I don't think anybody would have saw that coming either. So I think we kept people on their toes here, and I think this was a good answer to the boys over at Spirit of Time. I'm curious to see what our other buddies at Whiskey and Watches do. I think this week, either this week or next week, but we'll see. I mean, we all had kind of similar watches in our under 10K collection, so I'm curious to see if anybody tried to go off the rails a little bit and throw their own curveballs in there. But I guess time will tell.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, and with that, I think we're going to take out episode 37 of the Wrist Cheese Radio podcast. As always, thanks for listening. We will catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Deuces.